First of all, happy birthday to my father. He's a German American, and we're going to talk about a couple Germans today in my dad's honor. And also the meaning of life, which is, I think, a good birthday present. So we're going to talk about that too. But we'll start by honoring my father and giving those who know me a little lesson on how to pronounce my name. Now, I've known people sometimes for 25 years, and they still don't know how to pronounce this name. Some of you guys might not even know for sure. And so Americans, in my life, I've met 3 people that met me and pronounced my last name correctly the first time. I should make you all say it at once to see if you could get it. Now, most Americans say True. I heard you earlier, you said it right, okay? The fact is, most people say True, and I get why they would say that. It's a German word after all, so therefore it looks a little bit strange, and Americans just transpose the U and the E, and if I saw that for the first time and didn't know, I'd say Treu, I think, okay? But most Americans don't know how to say it, understandably so, and so they guess at it and they say True. But I've met 3 people in my life who met me and they were able to pronounce it correct. No surprise, they're all German, okay? Well, why is that? Well, EU in German, we see it in this guy's name. Everybody knows Sigmund Freud, and they don't say Sigmund Freud, they say Freud. Why? EU or REU in German is Roy. EU is pronounced Oi. And Deutsch, which is the German word for German, EU is Oi, Deutsch, Freud. So guess what? This is pronounced Treu, okay? And so for those of you who care about such things, that's how to pronounce it. I accept whatever, I'll go with it because I know it's a little bit of a challenging game, but that's how that's spelled. And so since we're doing a little bit of a German discussion today, that's, we're going to start with that. So my name is Steve Treu, but I will answer if you say Steve True, okay? Now, Treu in German actually means true, close to it at least. It means loyal or faithful. So it's close enough to the word true to let us roll with it whenever it happens. So again, we're going to talk about some German guys to start, and I'm going to try to be gentle on this one. Friedrich Nietzsche, okay? He was a philosopher back in the early 1800s to the mid 1800s. And if you know anything about him, he was a bit of a troubled soul. He was born and raised Christian, but then he struggled with Christianity later on in life. And he very famously said this sentence, "God is dead, and we killed him." And God is dead is what you hear a lot. I think they had a movie about that, or God is not dead. But it comes from Nietzsche, and it was because he was rejecting a lot of what became Christianity and some of the oppressive nature of it. In my opinion, he went way too far in many different directions. There's the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard famously said there's 2 ways to be fooled. One is to believe something that's not true, and another is to refuse to believe something that is true. I think Nietzsche threw out a God that he found to be oppressive and judgmental, a person who was obsessed with behaviors, a guy sitting in a throne getting ready to condemn people to hell, and like killing, mass murder when he flooded the world and allows disease and destruction and all that kind of stuff to happen. And guess what? I don't believe in that God either. I throw that out too. I wouldn't say that God is dead, but I recognize that's the type of God that I don't believe in either, especially when you just read scripture and talk about how God is love, and then you have forgiving and patient and merciful and all that stuff. So I didn't believe in that kind of God either. And Nietzsche sort of rejected that God, but he also didn't like the fact that he saw science moving in its place of religion and God, and that we killed him as we were becoming so scientific. And we've become so scientific that we've displaced God. Now I'm going to stick with Søren Kierkegaard, who says the other way to be fooled is to refuse to believe something that is true. Well, there is a God. We've talked about it a lot in here. And if we throw out God, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, if we say God is dead because we reject one idea of that type of God, therefore there's no God, well, we're going to miss out on the fact that there actually is a God. So God is very much not dead, but Nietzsche was sort of talking about a different style God. A lot of us have rejected the judgmental, getting ready to send you to hell type of God. And I think we're right to do that. I wouldn't say this phrase, but I can accept the fact that we looked at God differently for a long period of time. I believe that's why Jesus came, to show us what God really is and show us how God is inside of us. And God is a God of eternal light and love and spirit and compassion and all these things. And all the bad stuff that happens is not God's business. And so let's not blame him for that. So anyhow, Nietzsche says God is dead and we killed him. And I suggest Nietzsche, who ended up dying way too young, and he went pretty mentally ill. And he was a very depressed guy for a long period of time. And I would suggest, in one of the things that I said, he died under the weight of his own mind. And so I think he was a deep intellectual guy, but he was missing the key ingredient, which is that God is very much alive and God is very much spirit, and we're supposed to access that spirit. And when we do, again, as a mental health professional who works with addiction, heroin an awful lot, I see people who find that type of God, God is love, God is spirit, and it moves their stuff, their mental health and their addictions out of the way. The Holy Spirit can cleanse us of that. So that type of God is very much alive, okay? And so I'm all on board that, and I'm going to use Nietzsche's own words later to demonstrate what I believe the meaning of life is. I think Nietzsche was close. He was close. He rejected some stuff that I agree with. I don't like the oppressive nature of the church and some of its teachings. I very much like the spirit of it, as Jesus himself said. The flesh counts for nothing. It's the spirit that gives life. And God is spirit. He literally said those things. So what gives life? It's not the flesh stuff. So let's look at the spiritual aspect of it. So I'm going to use some of his teachings in one of his books a little bit later to back that up. Well, Max Planck, who is another German scientist, 50 years after Nietzsche passed away, said the following, and this is a bit of a paraphrase. He said, knowledge is a direct perception. Now, we're talking about a guy who mentored Einstein. He's supremely smart. He was very into knowledge. But he said knowledge is a direct perception. It's likened unto religion because you don't know something until you know something. He said you don't gain knowledge through reasoning. You do it from going from I don't know to I know. You know, like 1 + 1, which you didn't know when you were born, but then it clicked for you at some point. And then the square root of 49, which you didn't know, hopefully you know now. But at some point, I don't know, 3rd grade, and that's square roots, that's 7 times 7, right? So the square root of 49 is 7. And if you advance into calculus, and you're working on the derivative of x squared, anyone? 2x, I think I got that right. The fact is that that's something you don't know until you know it. In Spanish for the word fire, do you know that? It's fuego. So you didn't know it, then you knew it. And Max Planck says that's science and religion. You don't know something until you know it. And once you know it, it's truth for you. And that's, he goes on, science satisfies a metaphysical hunger that religion wasn't doing for people of his day in the 1800s, in Germany in particular. And that was what Nietzsche was frustrated with. Religion was fading, God is dead, we killed him, science is swooping in and taking all the attention. And Planck comes and says science is satisfying a metaphysical hunger. However, it's still stimulating a religious reaction. Because we're still seeking something. We're seeking knowledge. We're trying to learn what truth is. You can learn it with math. You can learn it with science and physics, which is what Planck was doing. But you can also learn it with truth. And the most important truth, is there a God? Is that God dead or not? That's the same thing as pursuing basic math or calculus. And Planck backs that up. He says, as such, science cannot take the place of religion. We're not going to be able to use science to figure it all out. We're not. And in New Eyes, we talk about, chapter 20, how faith is super important to be able to figure it all out. And that science will never answer all of it. Okay? So I think Nietzsche would have benefited from Planck by recognizing, listen, science is not going to be able to do it. You still need a gear inside yourself of recognizing that a sunset is beautiful. I could explain a sunset to you, but that doesn't mean you think it's beautiful. The level of seeing something as beautiful is something that has to happen inside of yourself. And that's not something science can do. That's what we have to do spiritually. And that's going to be the end game. And that's back to Nietzsche, okay? Now Nietzsche, in his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, is going through a very wise philosopher named Zarathustra who comes down from a mountain after learning a bunch of wisdom, and he tries to teach the people, okay? And in that book, he has a beautiful little set of concepts or an idea that I love that backs up what I experience now as the meaning of life. And studying Nietzsche and his concept of God is dead and getting into his philosophy, then coming across this concept is just a wonderful thing. And it added to, for me, my favorite therapeutic verse, all things work together for good for those who love God. I'm not reading Nietzsche because I want to see how God is dead. I'm reading Nietzsche to see how God is still alive. And I came across this concept in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, in which Nietzsche is talking about how our life and how, with God being dead, in effect, we have to somehow find meaning in our life or we're all going to be very depressed. Most of the science indicates that meaning in your life if you have meaning in your life, produces serotonin in your brain. And there have been really good studies on it. I've talked about it in some other videos, using some psychedelics to induce meaningful experiences to people who always feel better when you say something is meaningful, right? Do you like it when you feel things are meaningless? No, that's depression. Nietzsche felt pretty hopeless. Once he killed God, or he believed God was dead, now, like, what's the point of life? Nietzsche was trying to find a meaning in life, and he describes this process, starting with a camel, moving into a lion, and then three, which I'm going to say for the end, which I believe is the meaning of life. And Nietzsche describes, well, this is how life really goes. And he says, we need to be able to do this, what's called the Übermensch. In German, that means overman. To ascend to the highest level of ourselves somehow, to establish meaning for ourselves. Okay? Instead of listening to all the dogma of what got taught to us from church, we have to establish it for ourselves. Now, that's gone haywire, and it gets taken wrong for people who want to go in a nihilistic direction, or like use their authority to hurt other people. Well, I get to be my Übermensch or whatever, okay? I don't like getting into that. I say it's like the Buddha, who says if you'd like to come to know truth, you have to experience it yourself. And you're going to have to go find it yourself in the Kalama Sutta. It's not enough to just tell someone else that this is how it is and this is how you have to be. They have to have the authentic lived experience of that too. This is why religion isn't especially effective. Again, true authentic spirituality always works. But religion, if all you're doing is telling people how it is and all these rituals, once again, that's precisely why Jesus came, left his church, and came to fulfill the law. It wasn't about doing a bunch of rituals. That's not enough. We know that that doesn't work. Just going to church on Sunday doesn't work. But to fulfill the law is to have a direct experience of the Spirit, and then you know God is very much alive. And to me, that's the entirety of Jesus' teachings, which is on the heels of Buddha, who says, you're going to have to experience it yourself, so throw out all of the stuff that doesn't work for you and go live it, and then you know that it's true, because you didn't just listen to the pastor or the pope or the imam or whatever, anybody that's insisting this is how you must interpret it. You got to live it yourself. And Nietzsche's right about that. And he says during that phase, it's these two animals. The first thing that we do in life generally is like the camel. Camels bow down and then they start to take on burdens, right? And they don't complain about it. They just go, all right, put stuff on my back, right? And load me up. And then camels get up and they just start walking and they just start plugging away. And guess what? That's sort of most of our lives, isn't it? We just get loaded up. We've got burdens all over the place. And so we're just trudging along like camels for the most part. Now, part of this, because I love mindfulness, part of this we can do mindfully. If you say, yeah, load me up. Go ahead, put more stuff on my back. I can handle it. I can take it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's actually part of the meaning of life. Let's not complain about being a camel. We are camels. That's gonna happen. You're gonna get loaded up. Buddha's first truth, suffering, gonna happen. Okay? And during this phase of suffering, we can either sort of embrace our inner camel, or we could say, gee, I wish I wasn't a camel. Well, Nietzsche talks about a metamorphosis that has to happen. We're not going to just be a camel forever, because at some point we better turn into a lion. For him, it was a phase of saying, I'm not just going to listen to what the church told me to do. I need to go figure it out for myself. Again, there's some truth in that. I'm not going too far into Nietzsche here. There's some aspect of that's true. You know, just because you get baptized at birth, as Paul says too, he says that's just ritual. That doesn't mean anything. If all you're doing is saying, I go to church on Sundays from 11 to noon, I'm a Christian, Jesus is my Savior, I'm good to go. Jesus didn't say anything like that. He says, you got to pick up your cross and you got to carry it, and they're going to be crucified with me, like Paul says. Well, guess what? Picking up your cross and carry it is being a camel. Nietzsche was so close. He's got it. You're carrying around burdens, aren't you? Aren't we all? Yep. The lion, however, doesn't settle for being a camel. At some point, this is where the Übermensch shows up. At some point you say, yeah, camel's not all it's cracked up to be. Let's go ahead and look at my life different. I want to attack these burdens. I want to attack all this stuff on my back. I want to learn how to get rid of some of that stuff. I want to be a beast. I want to develop some courage, integrity and those types of things, discipline, and be a lion and live my life that way. And that helps relieve the burden of the camel. Because now you establish meaning for yourself. Now we're back to Nietzsche again. I think God is alive. You saying was God is dead. And I would say that the lion is finding the Christ within. It's finding the strength to get through your camel experiences. And it's recognizing that you're the warrior, but that's done by decreasing the level of ego. And it's also done by virtue. It doesn't do good to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves, right? Oh, woe is me, and I need an apology from you, stuff like that. No. Lions are like, I got this. In fact, I don't need an apology. I'll just forgive you. Now I'm free. And God only gives me as much as I can handle. That's a lion. And I can fend for myself. I got this. Doesn't matter. I don't need you to do anything. That's powerful. It's also the way Jesus lived. On that level, right? So he overcame his inner camel, which again is part of the process. Taps into the inner lion. There's the strength. There's the Christ. Nietzsche, so close. And then he does what I think is the meaning of life. I saved that. Now we're recording this, so I can't take 10 minutes and let you guys guess. But anyone want to guess? Anybody read Thus Spoke Zarathustra? Want to guess what the third one is? It's also an animal. I love this. Now we metamorphose into being a child. Because what do children do? They just play, right? They play. Relatively ego-free. And they're not worried about all the burdens. When you take on your burdens and you accept them and embrace them and you develop courage and you overcome them and develop the Übermensch, okay? And you develop, what we in this group do, the soul name thing, and talk about, who I really am, Revelation 2:17, God will give you a new name. God who is very much alive will give you a new name. It's because when you get to the level of functioning, I accept my camel. By the way, the camel is always with you. You're still going to carry stuff around. But if you balance it with the lion, now you can go play. See, doesn't Jesus say you have to approach heaven as a child? Well, there you go. Again, Nietzsche was practically being very spiritual. Just missed it, just by a hair. Too bad. But a child, and to me this is the meaning of life. I've thought about this many times too. Like, what is the point of all this? Why are we here experiencing all this camel stuff? What's the point of the burden? Why do we go through all of that? It's difficult work. Why does anybody go to a gym, though? Why does anybody go see a movie? It's entertainment. It's to get stronger somehow, okay? And children play. That leads us to Lila, the Hindu teaching, the divine play of Leela. Now, this comes from an idea that Brahman, which is the highest level of energy in, the Godhead, if you will, in the Hindu tradition, is playing a game. And we are the actors and actresses, okay? It's a play. Plays end. Think of any play. Think of just Les Mis, which is a good example of a play that was pretty miserable, wasn't it? And yet, doesn't it end with your heart swelling in spite of all the suffering and all the camelness that they went through? It's a phenomenal play, and yet we're weeping at the end of it because it's so human, isn't it? And yet we notice that there's something beautiful in it. Somehow love prevailed throughout the course of that, right? And like every good story we tell is along those lines. Why do we like movies? They're just plays. Why do we like plays again? Because they tell us a story. Well, the Hindu concept of Leela is we are in the divine play. This is a divine play. One that God, who is very much alive, one that God is playing with us. And there's a good question about that is, are you aware of it or are you not? Is it God's play or are we co-creators? Now, I like to think like any actor who goes off script and improvises, and if they do a good job, doesn't the director keep it in the movie? Sure, we're co-creators with God. You wake up, you balance your camel in your line, you find your inner child, now play the game. There's nothing else to do. There isn't a four. We've reached the end. You know that you're alive in spirit. You know what you are because you've tapped into the Übermensch. You know that the Übermensch is better than the ego, which is basically stuck in camel mode all the time. And so you get to experience the play along with God. It becomes a play in which we're co-creating. And now I get to operate as God, just as you do, together with divine inspiration. Precisely what Jesus said when he said, I don't do anything without my Father telling me what to do. It's like the director going, hey, do this, do that. Okay, whatever you say. Next thing you know, he's a great actor. Wasn't Jesus the best actor? And I mean that in the perfect Shakespearean sense. What did Shakespeare say of this concept? All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. Right? Shakespeare got it. The idea of Lila, it's just a play. It's a play that'll end. as I wrote about it in New Eyes. What happens after the performance is over? When my daughter was dancing and they closed the curtain and the music was over and the dancing was over, what did you hear backstage?
Screaming.
Just this eruption of cheers, like, yay, because it was fun. They had done something. That's our lives. We're living in a play. When it's all over, there's going to be some cheering, right? There's going to be a celebration. That'll happen. But you're allowed to know that now. If you don't know that now, that's called asleep. That's called dead. The dead part that Jesus resurrected people to was brought them back to their awareness that we're just in a play. And so if I'm on stage, again, God bless Heath Ledger, one of my favorite actors, and boy, didn't he nail the Joker in Dark Knight. Absolutely did. But what came him so much? His immersion into his character. He totally got into the Joker character. And I told you once before, that's why, based upon that, why I call myself TJ. It stands for the Joker. And TJ had one special skill. He knew it was just a play. The Joker had a special skill, written back in like the 50s or 60s in the Marvel comics. The Joker knew it was just a comic. He wasn't really killing people. Okay? If you, through this process of awakening, I'm not recommending people recognize it just a game, go kill people. That's not what I'm saying, obviously. But for spiritually minded people, you can know no one actually dies. And so if you want to ascend and play the game well and not have to come back and face karma, because you're going around being mean to people, ascend and realize it's just a game. And so the Joker, Heath Ledger, immersed himself in that character, and it unfortunately overwhelmed him because of the intensity of the character. And he lost his life because of it. But if you're on stage and you're acting, and the play ends, or if you're a ballet dancer or whatever we're doing, playing a game, when you walk off the stage, you stop playing that character. Did you see the Elvis Presley actor? What's his name? Austin Butler, I think his name is. For like 2 years, he practiced Elvis's voice. And if you've heard him speak, he still talks like Elvis. And his voice coach says, yeah, that might not change, right? You talk like Elvis for 2 years. Next thing you know, you've got Elvis's voice. Isn't that funny? Anyhow, you act like a character long enough. Next thing you know, you identify with that character. And here we have the meaning of life. I've acted like Steve for a long time. And so I start to stay as Steve. I act like a Steve, right? It's conditioning. I got taught that I was a Steve. Turns out that I'm just an actor, though. And I have the ability to recognize through my camel lion work, going through the burdens, then the strength to carry the burdens, and then the relieving of the burdens and all of that, man, you can wake up along the way and go, wait a minute, I'm not actually Steve. I'm just Steve temporarily. And now I know that I'm on a stage in the dance, the divine play called Lila, and so are all of you. And now you can know that what this is sure changes everything, doesn't it? And in the end, it tells me that God is very much alive.